It doesn't have to be a big project to make a difference. It can be something as small as, picking up the piece of trash that you see as you're walking home. It can be picking up after your pets. It can be using a rain barrel to water your native plants with. So there are lots of ways that you can combine these things, but it's, all these small steps build up to make a big difference.
Welcome to Community Rising, a podcast that examines environmental news in the coastal Carolina region. I'm your host, Akshay Gokul, and today we'll be exploring the impacts of storm runoff on the Cape Fear River. To start us off, I think it's important to understand what is storm runoff. So I sat down with Anna Ray Gingrich, the watershed coordinator of Heal Our Waterways, a City of Wilmington-led initiative designed to restore water quality in Bradley Creek and Hewlett's Creek.
Stormwater runoff is one of the main ways that non-point source pollutants get transported into our waterways. So that's things like bacteria, fertilizer, pesticides, motor oil, anything that's on land. So when it rains and that rain falls on hard surfaces like rooftops, roadways, sidewalks, driveways, parking lots, anywhere that water can't soak in, it will run off of that surface and it will carry anything that's in its path. When it's raining and it's falling on those rooftops and roadways and parking lots and driveways, anything that's on those surfaces can be picked up by that runoff and is transported to our waterways without treatment. So like pet waste, for example, contributes a really high amount of bacteria anytime that it's left behind and not picked up by the pet owner. So we also try to encourage people to pick up after their pets for that reason. So kind of the big pollutants that we deal with are like fertilizers, bacteria, litter, pesticides, motor oil, sediment, because in too large of a quantity, some of those things aren't necessarily bad things because sediment is natural. But if you have too much sediment going into a waterway, that can cause problems for, the aquatic life that live there. If you have, too many fertilizers going into a waterway, while they're not, inherently a problem, if you have too many of them, that can cause an algal bloom in a waterway, for example.
After talking to Anna about the topic of storm runoff more broadly, I really wanted to get down to the question of what negative impact does storm runoff pose to the Cape Fear River. So I decided to chat with Marissa Blackburn, the Environmental Education Manager at Cape Fear River Watch, to really hammer down this question.
We have the highest concentration of CAFOs in our river basin out of anywhere else in the world. And so we have a lot of animals, a lot of industrial animal farming. And so there's a lot of waste and waste management at those sites. Is it removing some of the nutrients and other bacteria that's in the animal waste? So we're seeing elevated levels of bacteria like E. coli, and that can cause human health impacts and animal impacts. Also, excess nutrients can cause algal blooms, excessive algae growing in our waterways. This isn't just an issue because of animal agriculture, but also in more, developed parts of the river basin from, fertilizer use too. A lot of golf courses and, residential areas are going to use lots of fertilizers, especially in spring and summer months. And those nutrients are going to wash into our waterways, and they're going to also cause algal blooms. And this is going to be excess algae growing. When that algae dies, the bacteria that break down that algae consume oxygen, which depletes the water of oxygen. And we can have what are called hypoxic or very low oxygen conditions that are not conducive for any kind of animal life in that waterway. So fish can die. We have what are called fish kills. And in Greenfield Lake, we've experienced that just a month and a half ago, where we had hundreds of fish wind up dead because of really low oxygen. When we went out and we tested the water, we had almost 0% oxygen out there. So I think lots of nutrients in the water, lots of bacteria in the water can make some of our local waterways unsafe for recreating in, or, unsafe for letting our dogs swim in or drink from.
Having talked with Marissa and Anna about this topic of storm runoff made me truly realize how direct its impacts are to my life, my neighbors' lives, and my community's day-to-day lives. And this is sort of the thing you don't really see in your newspaper too often or being talked about within our schools, making it all the more important to facilitate these conversations in order for us to be aware of the issue. Now, bearing everything that was mentioned in mind, I wanted to know what are some solutions that we as individuals can employ in our day-to-day lives to mitigate this issue of storm runoff. Here's what Marissa and Anna had to say.
Starting from very easy, if you have a dog and you walk your dog, making sure that you're picking up after that dog, because a lot of dog waste adds to bacteria in our waterways if it runs off. Things like cars and, auto fluids, those can be sources of runoff. Going to like a actual car wash to wash a car can be helpful because those systems, those car washes will have like that water will go down a drain and that will go into our wastewater treatment center instead of just like running down a storm drain. Or washing cars on grass is a great option too, to make sure that any of that like auto fluid gets naturally filtered out of the ground from the ground instead of, again, washing down a storm drain. Limiting use of fertilizers and pesticides on, individuals' residences is really helpful. Using alternate sources of like fertilizers, composting, in a garden instead of fertilizer can be really helpful. Pesticides are harmful, not using pesticides if possible, trying to use natural forms of pest control. There are options out there.
Practices like rain gardens. So imagine like a regular garden bed, but just turn it into a bowl shape. So that bowl shape allows the water to go into the rain garden, slows it down so that it has a chance to soak in that first flush of rain, because that first flush is where the most pollution is going to be concentrated, right? So if we can capture that in a rain garden, it soaks into the garden, the plants, the roots help to filter out those pollutants. That also helps to recharge the groundwater table. You're slowing down that pollution from reaching a waterway. We also look at constructed wetlands because they have all of those plants in there that can help slow down and filter the pollution. Another example would be like permeable pavement or permeable pavers. And when I say permeable, that means that water can actually soak into it. So it usually has kind of like a crinkle look to it if you look at it. We can also talk about native plants. Native plants are a great nature-based stormwater solution because they don't need those fertilizers and pesticides to do well here because they're already acclimated to local conditions.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Community Rising. If you enjoyed what you listened to, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, I'm Akshay, reminding you to stay informed and stay involved. This episode was produced by Akshay Gokul. Special thanks to our guests Marissa Blackburn and Anna Ray Gingrich. Our music is by Dennis Pavlov. If you enjoyed what you listened to and want to learn more, be sure to visit our website at www.shoresides.org.